This is Talking My Walking, and I am Rodrigo Ribeiro. Today I'm going to talk about why socialism cannot compete with capitalism and imperialism without participatory democracy and without the deep education and education and the culture that makes us understand, makes the main culture feel citizens responsible to protect democracy, to deep evaluate and understand the value of democracy, participatory democracy, and why that it is important to transform that culture into the dominant culture. Because as I say frequently, it's always to be the need. In our minds there is no void. Okay, we do not. Our minds are always related with the narratives, with whatever narratives. That's how we understand the world. That's how we understand ourselves. That's how we understand the relations with each other and everything else. So there is no void. What is it? What is there are dominant narratives, and the main issue is that the dominant narratives tend to operate implicitly, which means that we do not need at all to be aware of them. They just are who we are, and naturally. This is why it is very important. One of the most important the triumph of capitalism and imperialism in the 20th century and in the last until now. Now it's kind of crumbling. There are many holes in it, but it was the culture, the way the American elites were able to spread globally their imperialist culture, their vision of the world, their vision of a world order based on the imperialism, on the American exceptionalism, the exceptionalism of the American capitalism. Okay, when we talk about American exceptionalism or American exception, we are talking about a particular type of capitalism, which we can call it American imperialism. It is a type of capitalism with American characteristics. Okay, so it's capitalism with American characteristics. It is profoundly neo-colonialist and imperialist. And they were able to use the infotainment. This is very important to understand. The American elites there is the process since, I always repeat it, since the early 20s, you know this, when what was the name of the man that I don't remember right now, the father of the public relations Edouard Bernays, there was the awareness in the among the American elites, the deep state, whatever it was, they were aware, much more aware, and they still aware today, especially among the right. They understand the power or narratives. The left is so, I mean, especially the progressives, they are so bad in that. So the American elites, liberals plus conservatives, do not separate them in that. You can separate them in other issues, okay? Other cultural issues, but that's theater. It's not theater because they really, there is an ideological identity in that, but it is used as political theater. This is the main issue. It's not because liberals and conservatives do not have their differences. They do have their differences. They see, they understand society in different ways. But in terms of the protection of elites, power, structure, and wealth, there is no difference. So the ideological differences between them becomes political theater that divides us, that is used to divide us, that's mainly used to divide us, because they, of course, they benefit with our division. So that's a monkey. You can see, and it's gone. Okay, anyway, so they have perfected the cultural imperialism, and the success of the capitalist with American characteristics based on extreme consumerism and commodification, and the idea that as John Steinbeck once said, socialism, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, socialism could not set foot in America because Americans are just temporarily embarrassed millionaires, and this is so true. And the American elites were able to spread it globally, to create this delusion, you know, that we all are somehow embarrassed millionaires. You know, that's why we praise them. We, you know, that culture of celebrities, of vanity, of you know, that we all fall for. I mean, this is really true everywhere, and that's why socialism, without a deep conscious of what really it means, what a really socialist society. I'm not talking about Marxism. I'm not talking, when I'm talking about socialism, I'm not talking about. I'm really talking about social and ecological political economy. I'm not talking about any version that has already been, because first of all, I do not believe, I believe what I profoundly believe: for a sane and healthy society is necessary a culture of participatory democracy. That cannot be, if we do not develop and implement that culture, we cannot have democracy. It doesn't matter if it's with capitalism or with socialism. We might have a better society, but as long as we allow certain groups, okay, to become the rulers, to become, as long as we allow a pyramid scheme, because that's what a class society, a class system is, a pyramid scheme, you know. So that it doesn't matter what kind of, so that is to start with, to me, in my opinion. So that's the culture, and the Americans were really able to spread that culture of the, you know, the self-made man, the land of the free and the land of the brave, and you know, the American dream, and you know, the individualism and freedom, you know, because it was a big country and just so immensely wealthy at the end of the Second World War, that they could really, I mean, they stand out. The Americans stood out. They did have the means and the resources and the technology and everything to really show the world that they were an exception. They were the template for the rest of the world. As if we could all become, we could all spend and have the American lifestyles. The consumption of big cars, and all that. But that mentality still, that mentality is still dominant today. That is I mean, and by dominant I mean it is us, the one that will never ever have the possibility to become billionaires. Not even if we could live 100 times, I mean, we could have 100 lives. But somehow we believe that that is the American dream is possible, you know. But okay, it's possible if you work hard, you know. No. That's a lie. You can work hard all your life and you might not be and you can barely pay your bills. That is not true. And somehow it was in the 50s and in the 60s, and it was blue collar workers could really have nice lives and not be as indebted as today. So that was the good side of capitalism. The Americans could enjoy, due to the circumstances of their own circumstances, political, economic, and I mean, all the circumstances of the international community after the Second World War were, you know, the existence of the USSR, the threat of the communism and socialism, that were favorable to not fight to fight communism, but what I'm trying to say is there was not a culture of social democracy in America, but the American workers did. The American workers did benefit of the social democratic principles. Okay, that is. So they did benefit of that, but that is gone and is not going to come back. That's what people do not understand, that it's not going to come back. What the American what Americans need is to demand the end of imperialism. You know, not preparing to fight China or this or that. We all need to live in this world. We need to cooperate and create an international order that is the opposite of what we have today, competing for proeminence. That's the imperialistic mentality. And because we have capitalism, we need to expand and grow and grow and expand, and that will keep growing, because that's another feature of capitalism, and it's a special. It is exactly the actual American imperialism, which is financial imperialism, is mainly based on that, on leverage. That's all those financial instruments and schemes are based on that leverage. You know, there is a lot of leverage. It's not, the money is basically, I mean, just please do your research on this topic, because it is crucial to understand what the real capitalism looks like, how does capitalism really works, and how it all ends. It always ends in this deep this problem, this crisis. That's the reason. The crisis of capitalism, they are a feature of capitalism. They are especially a feature of financial capitalism. So it is important to understand, and this is the reason why socialism is not socialism. It's not. I mean, if people do understand socialism, and by socialism I again say it's basically it has to be based on a political economy, a social and ecological political economy. What it should look like, it has to be discussed, not imposed by anyone. But basically, we can have slightly different versions of that according to the conditions of each country. But we should be able to have an international community based on that, as we have the international community today based on financial capitalism. You know, it has been all these decades, all the international financial, you know, the system, the SWIFT system, the BISH, you know, all these the Bank International Settlements, the Bretton Woods institutions, banks of so many banks of developmental banks, and other the World Trade Organization, the so-called rules-based international order, all the international order, or the New World Order, as Bush emphasized many times, Bush father. It was about creating a political, economic, financial empire, you know, with the rules being dictated from Washington, D.C. the global governance should be dictated by Washington DC and Wall Street, or basically by the Pentagon and Wall Street. Okay? That was the idea, that new world order, it was about dictating the global governance and imposing it from Wall Street and the Pentagon, or the military-industrial complex. So this, and again, this has been possible because capitalism, these two principles, competition, there are the basic. The reason why capitalism works is so creative and works and very dynamic. Not only creative, maybe it's very dynamic. It's because the wealth accumulation and what it means makes people being driven to the pursuit of profit, to engage in activities, legal or illegal, that can make them rich. And that's why the financial system, financial industry attracted so many people. The fire sector attracted so many people. Finance, insurance and real estate attracted so many people during the last decades, because it was an easy way to become rich quite fast without creating anything. And that's the main thing. You know, that's not creativity, it is dynamism, but it is not exactly through creation. It was financial engineering, and they were pretty creative, you know, in inventing new financial instruments, and I mean it's absolutely crazy. The reason why capitalism is it can always defeat socialism is not because it's better. It's because exactly it creates artificial scarcity to make people not based on the idea that people would not work if people only work out of necessity, which is not which is not necessarily a lie. I mean, I'm not saying that that it's a lie, but it's not just. Of course, people have to work out of necessity, but people can also be have a society where they feel the obligation to work, and they know they have to work, because if the rules in a socialistic there was in the Soviet Union, people were working also hard, and they were creating, and they were doing research, and they were having technological advances and everything else. It's not because just you have to be driven by the profit motive and the wealth accumulation that makes us work. Of course, necessity makes us work, that's for sure. If you do not have any other choice but to look for a job, otherwise you cannot put food on the table, of course, what can you do? You know, there are people that they can be such extreme situations. That's why you have in certain parts of the world that people who were even selling their kids and doing really, I mean, making choices, horrible choices, out of poverty, out of extreme poverty. You know, people can really become lose their dignity, becoming completely poverty. It crashes people, and poverty is not because of lack of resources, it's because of someone else controlling the resources. Because you lose the inability to survive within a community. You know, there is no community, there is only families living together in small villages or small towns or wherever. The sense of community is very, it doesn't mean that people do not feel, do not have the feeling or don't have compassion or empathy for the people that are suffering. But that's not out of the of an existing community, because there is not such thing as a community. It's just as you know, society is composed of individuals and families. That was the ability of the capitalist system to create this. Out of what? Out of making the accumulation of wealth in private hands and property, the primacy of property and private accumulation of wealth, and the search for profit, the main values, the principles, even moral principles. Then you invent merit in order to, of course, that's why I call meritocracy, that you, whatever you make, it's you have the merit, you have the right to have it, because it's based on merit, which is not the case, which is the case in some cases is true, but it's not universally true. So it is not, but it is effective. And once it's transformed, that's the point I want to make, once it was transformed in the global culture, dominant culture, especially through the ability of the American elites to use culture as a way to convince people, to marketeer, to use the free marketeer propaganda to make people believe in the American dream and make people believe that everyone can become a millionaire. It's just a question of how much do you put of yourself into it to achieve it. And there should not be limits. You know, there is no limits. You should. It's just the pursuit of happiness, and the pursuit of happiness, of course, is related to the accumulation of wealth, because without money, without wealth and capital, there is no chance to be happy. Not because people say, okay, you don't need money to be happy, because happiness, sometimes people are not happier because they accumulate a lot of stuff. That is true, but it doesn't matter, because it doesn't make people less interested in accumulating stuff, and especially accumulating wealth. Because you can accumulate a lot of stuff, but it is just garbage, it's just junk. That's not the accumulation of wealth. That's what most of us do. We accumulate junk. But the capitalist class, they want to accumulate wealth, to concentrate it. to make sure that they control the wealth and they have the power to control society and to control our minds. And they were able to basically create the dominant narrative or narratives, because it doesn't mean that it's a single narrative, it's a combination narrative that forms a system. You know, that is a complex system or a complex net where of us, in spite of our differences, end up to being trapped. No? There are many ways that we are trapped by these cultural narratives. Because if it would be only a single narrative, it would probably not work. But this is a multi-layered and a multidimensional complex system of narratives. It forms a net that is where most of us end up trapped. That's why we cannot see through. That's why we are not able to understand that we can have another world. Another world is not only possible, it is imperative. Because we are headed to a dystopia if we do not end, if we are not able to understand and come up together internationally an alternative to the current system, which is very difficult. I'm not naive. You might believe that I am naive. No, I understand the reality. I understand the power that is. I understand how difficult it is to change people's minds. And how easy it's also to manipulate perception, to manufacture consent. I think I do understand it quite well. But at the same time, we can not only be doomists. We cannot only be doom and gloom. We need to have also the perspective of alternatives. But in a complex world, as it is today with the global economy, it doesn't matter. Do not. Okay, globalism is an ideology. Globalism was about creating a particular order. Okay, that's one thing. Globalization is another thing. Globalization is some people say globalization is that. No, globalism might be that, unless the United States of America wants to go to war basically with the world. Not a trade war, not a tariff war, as we are witnessing, but a hot war. Okay? So, if that was the globalist elite, and that elite was particularly a Western elite, with some people from some oligarchs and plutocrats from other parts of the world, but it was controlled by the Western powers, especially the Anglo-American imperialists. Okay, this is the truth about globalism. The idea, but the globalization itself is not. The globalization is not going anywhere. international trade is not going to end unless there will be a catastrophe, nuclear annihilation or something like that. So global trade is increasing, not decreasing. It might go through recession, and that is, it might have, but it's not going to end. So international trade is not going to end. What we need is not to end the international trade. What we need is to have laws and rules and respect for the sovereignty of countries, but at the same time we need an international system that people can rely, that countries and governments can rely on it in order to cooperate with other countries, with the international community, to create a sustainable world, in the sense a system that is politically, economically, financially, and militarily safe for all. And that is, of course, this is very difficult. And my point in all these conversations is that to try to make people understand that without our participation, without our understanding that we cannot deliberate the power to decide and make the policies into the ends without having any saying, it doesn't work. It will always work against us. Because, the reason why there are wars, is most of the time economic and financial. It's because there are powerful people that want to have more control of resources, territories, economies, countries. That's the reason. That are other reasons for war, cultural reasons, and other ethno-cultural divisions, and all these border disputes and things like that. But the main reason for major wars, they are basically because the elites want to expand their control over other regions, countries, economies, resources, and everything else. So an international system, needs to serve all in order to serve us. If you are an American, or a Russian, or a Chinese, or a Spanish, or a Bhutanese, or wherever you are, if you want a world, an international order that is good for you, you need to understand that international order needs to be also good for the rest of us. Because there is nothing special about you, there is nothing special about your country, there is nothing special about your culture, there is nothing special of your race or religion, or doesn't matter what, that to make you believe that you are entitled to special treatment, or special favors, or special rights. We do not need an international order, like I said before, that has been since the Second World War, like the IMF and the World Bank and other institutions, they have been, and NATO, and I mean, you know, those institutions, those organizations and institutions were created with imperialistic ideas in mind. Imperialistic control, expansion. And they were already, since long ago, to make America so powerful that no other nation on earth could defy the American power. And they were able, and this is why I try to make the point why the great success of the American empire was the cultural imperialism. That was the greatest success of all. Without that success, this success includes all the false flag operations, like the Operation Gladio, like so many other, you know, this cultural imperialism is a very diverse form of psychological operations, informational operations, marketing, ideological marketing, infotainment, you know, using Hollywood as a political tool to instrumentalize people all over the world, to create a certain reality with metaphors, you know, the division of good and evil, you know, the American democracy, the light of the world, and you know, the communism and fascism is the same. There is no difference at all, you know, between fascism and communism. So many people still believe that shit, that communists and fascists is the same. No, doesn't matter that you don't need to be to agree with communists, but you should understand that communism and fascism is two different things, totally different. Because if we do not understand it, we are all already buying into a cultural war. That is not, they do not care if it's true or not. They just care what about the effect it has on us. How it's going to frame reality, how it's going to frame our belief system, and how we perceive reality. That's what they care about. And this is, it was very successful. It was very, very successful till this day. This cultural imperialism is everywhere, especially through the deep dependency in convenience, the commodification of everything, the idea that private enterprise is always better than public control, and many other, many other. You know, that's really amazing. It was a huge success that was almost able to create to make America not great again, to make America the first global empire that could be hugely, and still is, okay, it still is, but it could be almost undefeatable. That was their idea, the idea of Paul Wolfowitz or Dick Cheney or all these guys that sometimes I don't remember the name of, or I'm not very good remembering names. All these people, their idea was about controlling the world. So then words like, but they didn't want, and that's why I feel frustrated when I see people believe that they are all in bed together. No, they are not. There are divisions. As I said before, there are a lot of oligarchs and plutocrats in every single country of the world that they would side with the American deep state, and they side it often. They often side against the interest of their peoples and their countries, because they belong to that special group, that elite, that international elite. So they can side together, they can join together in certain events, like the WEF, World Economic Forum, or other forums, and they can really sit together and discuss the world problems and whatever. It doesn't mean that they do not want at the same time, they are not still aware that imperialism, it still is imperialism, it still is a country, or it is based in it has a base, and in this case we have to talk about the American imperialism. We can say that it can be versus other imperialism. You can also say that there is a Chinese imperialism or a Russian imperialism, or that is debatable, but it's not what I want to discuss here. So I do not want to. What I want to emphasize is that, in spite of all that it seems, in spite of that seems at first glance that these people are all in bed together, because they have a kind of there are certain policies that seem to be implemented. They try to implement all over the world. So some people say, okay, they want to implement CDBCs. They want to implement identity, all these measures that they seem to be, they start to be shared by many countries all over the world. It doesn't mean they are all in bed together, because this imperialist phenomenon is not a world phenomenon. It was this is a very important point. This was an American idea to create the first global empire. Some call it Anglo-American Empire. Others call it the Pax Americana, or American US empire. It is irrelevant. What is relevant is that is still based on a country. There is the that it was supposed to be controlled by an elite, which again, they need allies, they need puppets. So you cannot have a global empire without puppets and allies, without vassals. Okay, so you need accomplices, and of course, you need to give something back to those accomplices, and in order that they will, or you can threaten. There is the idea of a carrot and a stick. Okay, but it doesn't mean that it is still not the empire based in a centralized power in a country, in institutions that are controlled by a country, because country, the concept and the idea of country is still and the idea of state itself, it's really crucial. You cannot have a global empire. I mean, it is stupid not to believe in a global empire, that it's not centralized, that power is not centralized somewhere. There's a global empire, okay, but power needs to be centralized somewhere. There needs to be who dictates the governance, who controls the international financial institutions, who controls. That's why it was called unipolarity. That's why they wanted a unipolar world. Not because they are all together in bed, but because the power and the control was centralized and controlled by a specific elite and a set of institutions. Not controlled by everyone. And why is that? Because if they were all together in bed, they could also compete for power, and the power could shift. If the power was not centralized, if the control of the institutions that are part of that sustain this global empire, if they are not concentrated and centralized, you can see the same idea in the European Union. They want to centralize. That's the idea. They are all in bed together. I don't know if they are all in bed together or not. I think they just want to have the power centralized in order to dictate the policies, to dictate the governance from Brussels to the rest of us. So it's not going to be the Chinese that are going to dictate it. Maybe the Americans, in spite of all these disputes, tariff disputes, and all this rubbish, they still. I mean, do you believe that they overnight now are adversaries? I mean, this is political theater. It doesn't mean that there are no differences. Yes, of course there are, but the Americans are still in control. So that's why the internet is full of rubbish, because people do not understand that just because there are just because there are similarities, but because there are policies, national, domestic policies in so many countries that they are following the same agenda. They are following the same agenda because that's like it happened before. They follow it because they want to have control over their own population. And if it works for one country, you just make it, you just copy paste it. You know, that's how it works. It's not about being in bed together. They are in bed together for what? In some issues, but in terms of the fight for global power and global governance, and the first global empire, Anglo-American or US empire or Pax Americana or unipolar global hegemon or whatever words, there the only country or the only group of Western powers but guided, okay, controlled, managed by the American elites or deep state or permanent bureaucracy, deep politics. It was America. That was the only country that intentionally wanted to control the whole world. Not the Chinese, not Russia, not the Soviet Union. Nobody else wanted that, and nobody else now wants it. There is still, the Americans are mad. The neoconservatives are mad. The oligarchs and plutocrats are mad because they see they cannot accept they are losing the ability to control so easily. It's not because they have given up. Of course they have not given up. They are using all tools of the toolbox, of the imperialistic toolbox, to gain control, to not lose control, to destabilize politically everywhere they can. You know, everywhere they can, they do it through all the mechanisms that everybody knows. They are known. Only people that don't want to know. It's the CIA playbook should be by now known by everyone. And all the agencies, NED, and people talk about US aid. What is the role of NED, National Endowment for Democracy? What are they doing everywhere where they are? Don't you understand the role of Victoria Nuland in the preparation for war with Russia, for preparing Ukraine for a war with Russia? Is that so difficult to understand? That war was only about, it was a provoked and a desired war just to weaken Russia. And we are not done yet. We do not even know yet where that is going to lead us, the citizens of the world, but especially the citizens of Europe, the European citizenry. So the reason socialism is not able to become mainstream and to be discussed honestly, intellectually, not because it's good or bad, but because we need an alternative. And I do not care with labels. We should be able to discuss as free citizens, because we are supposed to be free citizens. But we are only supposed to accept, but supposedly there is no alternative. There is TINA, okay? There is no alternative, which means that we can discuss everything we want, but not an alternative for this system. So this is a cultural, this is defeat. This is how language frames reality in a way that we are already defeated before we start thinking, before we start discussing the possibilities. So, and this is part, everything of that has been used as part of the cultural imperialism. But when we think about cultural imperialism, of course, cultural imperialism is not only to indoctrinate foreigners far, on other parts of in the global south or everywhere. It is also part to keep us, Western people and maybe people in other, or like South Korea, Japan, and all these countries that are kind of in the sphere and the Western sphere of influence. That we are to not be able to even dare to discuss alternatives in a serious manner, not only as kind of rhetoric. Just I see many people that they discuss ideas, but then they don't discuss them in a way that they want to change reality. There are so many people discussing ideas, but not with the intention of changing the reality. And this is just cognitive dissonance. These people do not want to change anything. I don't even know what they want. I don't even understand if we do not discuss ideas and discuss ways that we can together come up with solutions, not from top down. Stop it. There are no saviors. Again, I have to repeat it again and again. There are no saviors. There are no authorities. There are no, there are not. It has to be a collective conscious process. Otherwise, it won't be anything of value. There will not be change. And again, it can only happen that if we become educated, if we really think about the necessity of a culture and an education to the democratic participation, not only for a revolutionary process, so for a deep change process, but for the continuation, because we are talking about society and the economy, and life is a process. It's not something that we don't achieve anything. It is a continuous process. So the culture that needs to be dominant, and when we need to make people understand, that the future generations understand that relevance, otherwise always we go back, because there will be always opportunists, there will be always psychopaths and sociopaths that want to take over. They are not going. They are not going to disappear. And this is another point, important point. Or either we create a culture resilient, democratically participative, that is resilient against that we can spot the people that want to use perception manipulation, okay, in order to make us believe that it's good for us if we follow them, if we just become followers, that we don't need to participate. You just need to look up to the pedestal and listen to them. No, we need to become iconoclasts, not devotees of people talking from the ivory towers or whatever kind of towers they talk to us. Okay, we don't need that. Nobody needs that. Even the person that thinks he's stupid or cannot understand. No, we all can understand if that's explained in simple ways, and everything can be explained in simple ways. That's why they want complex. They complicate. It's not even about complexity. It's about complication. They make it so convoluted, like the financial system, that they want us to not even dare to do our research. To be interested in understanding it. And it is exactly how we are being screwed, crushed, made useless. Okay? So I think I think we really need to have an honest discussion. Socialism is not dead. Real socialism has never really existed. There were experiences, but experience fighting against a dominant power, a 500-year-old system, plus a system of class and caste order, hierarchical order, that is even much older. So it has born with the imperialist civilization. And this is how we need to frame it. To understand that we have been fighting against the people that has been oppressed and exploited. I'm not talking about workers. I'm talking about citizens in general that have been oppressed. Okay, we are workers. I don't deny that, but don't be just open it more instead of calling on the workers. Workers call citizens, and we have been exploited and reduced to have been objectified and exploited and commodified, not only since the capitalism exists, but since the imperialist civilization exists. Okay? So what we need is to understand that it's capitalism, that how can we it is so difficult because if you have these already very ancient ideas of hierarchical order, social order, class or caste based, justified with so many, that's pretty easy to justify, doesn't matter, to find logical fallacies and to find ways to justify anything. That is very old, and plus 500 years of capitalism, and then you have a few experience of socialist experience, and you say socialism doesn't work. It has proved. Don't you understand that it was a huge fight against the dominant system that didn't go away? It was still there, very powerful, and a nation that emerged, a powerful nation that emerged out of the Second World War with the idea of becoming the unique power, the first global empire, and it had the means. The United States of America represented half of the economy after the Second World War. So we need to understand that it's not because socialism doesn't work. Socialism has not been allowed to work. Okay? Which means that I'm not talking about a particular, I'm just talking about a discussion that we need to have if we want to be intellectually honest. And by discuss, it's us. I'm a peasant. I have all my life trying to fight against being crushed by this system. You know, you have to fight back in order to be sucked into the infotainment, you know, into the bullshit that they don't want you to become aware. They want to entertain you, they want to lie to you, they want to indoctrinate you, they want to become a servant of them. They don't want you to be free. Forget about that. That's the last thing they want. It's you to be especially mentally free, to think by yourself, to understand the concepts and the ideas that are in the roots of the problems. They don't want it. That's the last thing they want. Those free marketeers and the narco-capitalists and all this and the right to, I mean, unfortunately, the progressives and so many people that are supposed to be left, they just don't understand class politics. They don't understand. I mean, it is just beyond the pale. So that discussion is deeper and wider than you can believe. But we need to have it. If you want to have a chance to become, to fulfill the idea of a civilized humanity, the dream of a civilized humanity, that's not what we have, but we can achieve it. Okay? We can achieve it. That's only to become aware of what it means. How can we achieve it? Together. Not be just ruled and guided by fake wise people, fake saviors, fake authorities. No, democratic participation. That's what we need. Democratic participation, a culture and an education and a society and an economy that rewards democratic participation and democratic accountability. That's what we need to fulfill the dream of a humane civilization and an ecological civilization, an holistic ecological civilization based on a social and ecological political economy. Thank you for listening. Until soon.